Pharmaceutical company Prevacus says their new concussion medication Prevacol helps repair nerves and promote cell growth.
We can get the drug in the brain in less than 5 minutes. And our plan is when we get that diagnosis on the field of play, give the drug nasally, get it in the brain quickly. When it gets in the brain, it actually gets into the nucleus of your brain cells, and it reduces swelling, inflammation, and oxidative stress at the same time.
When Jake and I first talked about this many years ago, one of my first questions was, will this help me? And he goes, no, this is for treatment immediately when a concussion or you think a concussion has occurred.
Yeah. The acute problems that exist later on in life, if we can take care of these at an early age and start getting some of these things to our children and grandchildren, and I think we can make this game, our game, football, a safer place.
And so the whole goal is we're trying to make the game safer. And so Odyssey and this drug, we believe, can be a game changer in so many different ways. Yes, on the football field, in the game of football, because that's where my passion lies, but also in the game of life.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Play Like a Girl. I'm your host, Gianna Cambria, as always. And like I promised, we have another amazing guest this Monday. She is the Fans Only Sports Network, WNBA, and USA Women's Basketball sports journalist. So everybody give a warm welcome to Lauren Rosenberg.
Hey, what's up?
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm still kind of recovering from my best friend's wedding on Saturday. Yeah. But I'm really happy to be here just to talk about whatever we're about to talk about.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you're here too. And it's actually so funny you say that because a friend of mine had a wedding on Saturday as well. So it's such a coincidence.
Yeah, that really is.
So I wanted to hop right into my first question, which is, how did you know sports journalism was a career that you wanted to explore and get into?
So ever since I was a little kid, I always just loved sports. I was really the only one out of my biological family of me and my sisters who really just loved sports, really kind of looked forward to watching football every Sunday, to look forward to watching basketball, to watching baseball. I'm from Houston, Texas, so naturally we would have the Texans on, the Rockets, the Astros. But those aren't even my favorite teams. Yeah. So I just kind of fell in love with it since forever. And when I was really young, my mom would leave to go grocery shopping every Sunday, and I would have the Texans game on. And I would just end up sitting on the floor in my living room in front of the TV with the TV muted. And I would be calling out a play-by-play type of thing with if Andre Johnson was going for a slant route type of thing, then I would be Matt Schaub goes into the pocket and then passes to Andre Johnson on the slant or a play actor. I would just be doing that, and my mom would come in from it, and I wouldn't hear the door open because I was so zoned in on whatever was happening at what was then Reliant Stadium.
Yeah.
And then I think that's just kind of when I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And it never changed. Some people thought that it would change as I grew up. I'm 23 years old right now, and I am still living my dream right now of doing sports journalism. It's kind of how I knew.
Yeah, well, good for you. It's always good to, do the job of your dreams, as everybody says. You don't want to do something you hate. You want to do something you look forward to every day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's funny you say that because I took a play-by-play class at my college too, and I completely fell in love with it. And I can just imagine you sitting in front of your TV and doing that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it kind of led to what I literally did all throughout college was broadcast.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Sports broadcast. So I just realized that's just what I wanted to do. I always loved to write. Mm-hmm. It just kind of all melted in together to become my passion.
Yeah. So with Fans Only, you have a concentration in the WNBA and USA Women's Basketball. What about this sport intrigues you the most?
Okay, so aside from doing also WNBA and Team USA, I also do NCAA.
Okay, NCAA.
Women's basketball. So I do literally women's basketball across the whole spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it all. I used to play basketball when I was a kid. Like that was the sport, like with tennis, I just like fell in love with and gravitated towards. I played basketball in middle school, and it was just something like I always loved. I always loved watching basketball. It was always my favorite sport to watch. It's my favorite sport to go in person. But I actually wasn't even exposed to the WNBA or women's basketball until I got older.
Wow.
And Houston had the first dynasty of the Houston Comets. They won the first 4 world championships.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I didn't really know anything about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I grew older, and in my middle school health class, they actually Coach Wakefield, so my health teacher, had a giant like life-size cardboard cutout, of Cheryl Swoops.
Okay.
And then that got me even like really more intrigued. Like I knew they existed.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't exposed to it. I never went to any games.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped in 2000. Oh gosh, I was in 2nd grade. Whenever Hurricane Ike was, is the year after that. So I think 2008 was when they folded. So like I was in 2nd grade. So it kind of just took a lot of me independently going out and Googling like about the WNBA. And then as time progressed, I just kind of just fell in love with women's basketball and watching it in general. And then it really like came into fruition when I got to college.
Yeah.
And because I went to the University of Missouri, as you can, see on my shirt. And they had Sophie Cunningham, who is now on the Phoenix Mercury in the WNBA. And she is from Columbia, Missouri, literally hometown hero, hometown kid. And she's very gritty, blue collar, just so good, brought fans to the stands when men's basketball couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because men's basketball did not have any of those players. And I just like fell in love really with being able to go in person watching my first ever women's basketball game. That's just how I knew like this is what I wanted to do. I made it an effort on my student radio station to report as many women's basketball games as possible. That ended up going to broadcasting it. And with reporting, you would live tweet and write a column after. To in 2020, in March 2020, like 2 weeks before the COVID shutdown, I got to broadcast the SEC tournament.
Wow. Okay.
That's just how I knew. Like I just progressively just continued falling in love with women's basketball.
I can definitely agree when you say that. I went to URI, and my school's all hyped for the men's basketball team, and I started broadcasting the women's basketball through school, just like you did. And I was just so much more intrigued by the women's games. They were so much like, I don't know how to put it into words, but they were like more willing to try harder. They were just like, I don't know, something about the way that they played just made me want to get on the court with them and play.
Yeah.
Because when I was watching the men's game, I was like, okay, well, I'm like used to this. But the women were and they were on a winning streak the entire year for my school. And I was like, we're better than the men's team right now. Nobody is even paying as much attention as they should be.
Yeah, I do agree with that completely, even with like just even the difference of the NBA and WNBA, because not all WNBA players or women's basketball players can dunk. They have to rely more on like dribbling drills, footwork, actually, implementing the mid-range shot that the NBA and just men's basketball in general are trying to get rid of by only doing threes and posts and all that. So I feel like there's also just a lot more grittiness and not a lot more energy and like defensive toughness that the NBA is really like lacking of right now in just men's basketball. And I think that's why it's quicker, and a lot of people, if they ever get the chance and like are willing to watch women's basketball, they'll notice that and realize that the game is not just all 3 points and dunks.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were given the opportunity to cover another sport, which would you say it would be and why?
Oh my gosh. This might actually be like so strange because like I said, I'm a huge football and baseball fan, right? And I'm a huge softball fan, but volleyball.
Yeah.
And the reason is so simple. is my sisters played volleyball, and then I was always at like my middle school volleyball games. My best friend who passed away played volleyball.
Okay.
So I was just all over volleyball anyways, but the second game I ever reported my freshman year at Mizzou was the NCAA tournament, Mizzou versus Purdue in the second round that was hosted in Columbia.
Wow.
I loved it. So then the next year, I was in studio for the tournament, Mizzou tournament against, this is all NCAA, by the way, against Wichita State and then Kansas, where they in Wichita State. I would have gone in person to broadcast or report, but I had a sorority obligation, so I was just in studio for all of that. And then when they went to Penn State for the Sweet 16, I was in studio for that too. And then my junior and senior year, they were playing in Lincoln for both times, so I went on the crew to report in Lincoln my junior year for the first and second rounds, and then my senior year I broadcasted the first and second rounds. So volleyball, I got to do every single NCAA tournament for them.
What great opportunities, though. You've had such opportunities so far.
Yeah, I'm really lucky that that Mizzou is like that. And this isn't even part of the journalism school. Like the student radio station is, you like don't have to be in journalism to do this. So yeah, I'm very thankful about that.
So what would you say is the most challenging aspect about your job?
I guess trying to prove myself and prove that I know my stuff and like know about sports, and continuously trying to feel like legitimized.
Yes.
Because there are so mthe guys just in general, and even in the radio station, that were like, oh, sports, okay, we'll name like one random team in the NFL, or like name a random player on the Chiefs, and I would just name like the literal most random player on like all these teams that like even the guys forgot existed.
Yeah.
Like it was just the constant having to prove myself until like some of those kind of guys were just like, okay, you know your stuff. I think that is one of the biggest, just because I'm not a guy.
Definitely. And you shouldn't be looked down upon just because you are not a guy in the sports industry. I feel like women all over the world who are in this sports journalism, who are in media coverage, just are looked down upon, degraded, are just given such harsh words against them, and it just should not be occurring, because what's the difference between us and men?
There's literally none. Like,
we know it,
unless we're going like body part wise.
Yes.
Well, like there's really not.
Exactly. And like you have a degree, they have a degree. Why have to ask so many questions?
Exactly. It's society and stigmas are annoying. I've been fighting those my whole entire life. So like, yeah. So
what advice would you give to a woman who wants to do sports journalism in the future and is on the gate or on the fence between it?
I would tell them to not be intimidated, because I mean there were times that I really was intimidated just because of like who I am, my identities as a whole, but I kept with it. And even though you do have to constantly prove yourself, you need to don't give up and prove that you have a space at the table or a place at the table, whatever way you want to say that, because you 100% do. It's going to be hard to kind of find it, but if you know the right people, if you find the right people who are supportive, then you're going to just go on the up, and you will end up being respected by those people, and it'll spread. And there's going to be people who don't respect you for it, for anything, for whatever you identify as, but that's reality. But I would say don't be intimidated and don't get scared, and just keep fighting. Like that's exactly what I would tell them.
100%. That was great advice. And anybody who is watching this should definitely listen to what Lauren just had to say, because it's the truth. It's what we're going to deal with our entire lives, but don't let that bring you down or stop you from pursuing your dream.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously sometimes conference meetings don't go as planned, and there's coaches who just absolutely hate the media or will refuse to answer certain questions at hand. So what is your response to this? How do you deal with it when it occurs?
Well, I think a really good example of this is actually what just happened with Naomi Osaka.
Mm-hmm.
And how she backed out of the French Open because there were just all these ridiculous questions that were being asked. And I think it's our job as media to respect the athletes and respect the coaches, because they are not obligated to answer all of your questions. That's not their job. Our job is to, of course, get the answers you can to make a good content, make a good story, whatever, but to also realize that they are people too.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to ask a question, then don't ridicule them for it. Don't pressure them to do that. Don't ask that a million times later, because you'll get the same answer. Then they will know your name and they will start disrespecting you.
Yeah.
And they really, like, they'll see you if someone calls your name and like Zoom media is like what we've been doing, forever. Since, okay, it feels like forever. It hasn't been forever, but I mean, since COVID started. When whoever the Stratcom person, the PR, whoever you want to call them, is like blah blah with blah blah, and the coach knows that, or the player knows, like, this is not going to be like a good interaction, then they will say, I don't want to answer, no comment, next question. And just the way you deal with it, you have to respect it.
Yeah.
And even let's just say that the next person who does tries to ask the same exact question, then that's going to put a red flag on your name too. Mm-hmm. So if they're not going to ask the question, or if they're not going to answer the question, don't ask the question a million times. That's how you have to deal with it. You have to respect them. They're human. We're human. It's just kind of how you got to do it. You guys got to roll with what you get.
Yeah, exactly. So what is one thing that you wish you knew before you began your career in sports journalism?
I wish, because I've wanted to do this since like first grade, and like we don't really have a concept of gender when we're that young. It starts around third, fourth, when puberty hits. I wish I would have been told how hard it would be, how hard being a woman and being part of the LGBTQ community will affect the way I'm perceived, will affect the way people interact with you on social media, and to just know like how tough mentally it's going to be, and how much that I will probably end up wanting to quit, and how much strength it's going to take to get out of that hump and just to say, like, I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I would have known all that stuff before, but it's just something you have to like live and learn to. And like, there really weren't a lot of like, or really any LGBTQ like media people until maybe like the last decade.
Yeah.
So growing up. So like, I wish like there was more of that. Same with players. I wish I was told all this, how just groundbreaking this was all going to be. So I wish I was told the negatives, and I wish I was told the positives. Yeah. It's kind of like if you could see yourself in the future, and like future you is telling you like what's going to happen, how you're going to do this. I kind of wish there was something like that.
Yeah.
But then again, no, because it's cool to like see like how life is going to go and then how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, kind of like one of those things.
It is really cool. And you just have to have a strong backbone, which is something that I can say in what we've been talking for 20 minutes. You definitely have that. You're going so far. You've been doing so well already. And I would not listen to what anybody has to say, because people suck in short.
Yeah, you're telling me.
You know, the only person that truly has your back is yourself, because you're the only person that's there through your struggles and your hardest times. And, you know, you just have to remember that. Do it for yourself and nobody else. Prove to everybody.
Exactly.
Prove to everybody who you are and why they have to know your name.
Exactly. And like, of course, like for anyone listening, it is tough. It's going to be hard, but like that's just kind of like what you gotta do, and you'll grow from it. Whatever it is, you can get down on it, and then you gotta get up and grow. And I know that's like sounds easier than I'm conveying it, but trust me, I got a lot of mental illnesses and stuff, and I've known what I've had to do. And you gotta get to the lowest of points to be able to get back up and realize like the purpose that you got.
Yeah, for sure. So it is Pride Month, and knowing that,
yeah, it is.
We already do know that you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community. What has it been like to be a woman's reporter in the sports industry? I know you got a little bit into it, but since COVID has happened and since everything, especially this month, how has it felt for you?
So since COVID and everything, like I kind of felt like I lost a lot of like my purpose in this, even though I was part of a women's basketball publication covering the Big 12. But it was kind of like a lot of like self-reflection and like, because like this is something that just happened and like stopped, and like that was completely out of every single person's control.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to reflect on so many different things because you have like this giant stop, and then it makes you think like, what else are you going to do when you're inside all day? Like, okay, well, I'll play video games. Like, I'm a huge gamer, so like I would be playing video games. But when you're not doing that, when you're not watching Netflix and stuff, you have to like kind of just think your life through, and you have to think. I think it gave me a good amount of time to also kind of like reaffirming like my identity as being like a woman LGBTQ person in sports, to kind of lay it all out there, look at the pros and cons, and figure out how I can change myself for the better, not for what society wants to see me as, not for any of that, but to change it to like be authentically who I am. And I think that really did help me, especially like with the time in between when sports stopped and then when the bubble started happening.
Yeah.
And when the MLB came back, it was just one of those things that kind of just like makes you think. It makes you also like further appreciate like that you're in, like that I'm in the place that I'm in.
Yeah. Which I mean is great. Obviously COVID sucked and there were so many negatives that came from it, but in every negative situation you have to think of the positives. And some of the positives from COVID is that people reevaluated themselves. People like pros and cons lists, like you said, people learned from what they had, and people just tried their best to make it through it and make their life better after.
Yeah, exactly. And like I can say like I definitely did that. And my mental health sucked during a lot of it during the time. Like I wasn't going to get an in-person graduation. I wasn't going to be able to do any more reporting and broadcasting and stuff. Like with the radio station at Mizzou, I wasn't going to be able to see my friends because a lot of my friends went back home. But I learned more about myself. I learned how to get out of the funk that I was in and just kind of like continue on with like life and everything, and just kind of find new things that I love. Like I learned that I love making gifts. Like I love doing that now. Like I have a whole set of like gifts from this past Mizzou women's basketball season. Like I learned that throughout COVID. I love doing that.
Yeah. And you know, you just gotta live and you learn, you know? There's so many things that you can learn about yourself on a daily basis, and COVID just helped you with that, you know?
Exactly. Of course, there were like so many negatives to COVID. Like
so many.
I mean, I couldn't get it up, but like I'm not even gonna lie. Like I would leave my apartment every single day because I get very stir crazy. So I would leave to drive around Columbia, but I also would go through the Dunkin' drive-through because one of my friends worked at Dunkin', so I would just like sit in the window. And it was so funny. So like I did that because like I had nothing else to do. I mean, like I had to do like my homework and stuff, and like, but like when I wasn't doing that, when I was done and everything, I was kind of like, oh, okay, Cam, I'm gonna come and like hang out with you in the drive-thru.
No, but that's the best sometimes, you know?
Well, yeah, exactly.
So I was gonna say that there was a video that went viral on Twitter a couple of years back. I don't know if you saw it, but it was about female broadcasters, and they were reading their own hate comments. And it was so, like, when I was watching it, I was like, oh my God. So I know that in the past, members of the LGBTQ plus community we're viewed as minorities. I know we've come a long way from that, but sometimes just the way that people speak is disgusting. But I'm wondering that if you've received any hate, and if so, how did you get past it? How did you just say, I don't care what you have to say? Like, yeah, that hurt, but I'm gonna make the best of what I have, and I'm just gonna move on from it. Like,
oh my gosh, I have a lot of stories. Like, I think my favorite one though was with current Washington Mystics guard/forward. Her name's Aerial Powers. Last summer, when she was playing in the bubble for the Mystics, she like went off in like a game, and Andre Iguodala like tweeted something to me like number 23 on the Mystics is nice, and she quote tweeted it saying, "Put some respect on my name or keep like your tweet like out of it," or like something like that. And people like went off because like I think a lot of them were just kind of like, you should be grateful that Andre Iguodala just like quote tweeted you and did this, but the whole point was also that like her name is not number 23 on the Mystics. Her name was Aerial Powers, and I guess like now I guess she'd be, if Andre Iguodala was watching her again, she'd be number 3 on the Minnesota Lynx. But like so in there I was defending AP because she and I are pretty tight. Like, I moderate her Twitch streams. She's a huge gamer as well. Huge LGBTQ advocate because she's also part of the community. And I like defended her, and I got all these like disgusting responses that were like very homophobic because they just saw like the pride flag in like my Twitter name.
yeah.
And we're like, oh, she has a pride flag, like ignore it, or like ignore everything she says, and like those types of things. There were some like really bad ones that are not safe for work, so I ain't gonna say that, but it was horrible. Like, I got like so many DMs because my DMs were open, and I didn't like respond to any of them because I'm a bigger person than that, but like it was just a lot of name calling me, and like a lot of being like there's no place for like the homos in like sport, and like just all these like horrible things. And even like AP got a lot of them in the comments, which really affected her as well. And it was just tough to like see. And I had like some of my friends, like my best friend who just got married, like he like went off on like these people in the comments because he's like my biggest advocate. And it was just like a whole big thing. And like my username on Twitch and my username on Twitter are the same thing. So people would go in to her Twitch chats and just say like number 23 in this, and then say like really homophobic stuff towards me and her, because like I said, my username is the same. And then I'm a moderator, so I banned them in like 2 seconds. But it's just horrific how like bad people are, and how people were just kind of like, she should be appreciative and this and that, and like Andre Iguodala saying like no manners. But also just a big thing about this is that Andre Iguodala didn't want his daughter playing basketball because of fear that she would turn gay. And there's like a whole article about it. And it was just like one of those things. It's kind of like it's horrible, and like people are always going to be like this, which is kind of something that you have to like get over and like navigate. And even then I will still get notifications from like people like liking like the tweet that was mentioned in like with homophobic stuff, and then messaging me and everything, and she still gets them too.
That's
so it's kind of like that. I mean, it hurts, but she's gotten over it. I mean, as much as possible, I have too. And it's just like, you just got to look for like the people who actually like will advocate for you and like care about you and defend you.
That makes me so angry, because I feel like people have nothing better to do than to watch something, see something that they don't like, and seconds later reply in such an aggressive way to something that affected their lives for 1 second, you know?
Exactly. Like, they can just keep those thoughts to themselves.
Exactly.
Like,
and if you're posting comments like that on social media, imagine if their family saw it or if their friends or who they were working for and like the consequences that can come to them. I mean, they deserve it if they're commenting stuff like that. But also, like, I feel you. I mean, on this podcast, there's been people in the comments when I'm live just completely going at it. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm so sorry for anything that I've said that might have offended you. But like, I'm hosting a podcast about female empowerment and you're here bashing on me for being a female host, which
Yeah.
like, there's just nothing you can do about it. In the end, you literally just have to brush it off and just stay true to yourself and stay humble. You know, if you reply in an aggressive way or if you even reply at all in general, it makes people angry. And then it just and that's not something that even nobody wants that to happen.
Like, I ain't even gonna lie, I did respond. Like, when a lot of these like responses to me happened, I was actually in the parking lot at Target.
Yeah.
Columbia. So I was like, I need to go to Target and get whatever the heck I needed to get.
Yeah.
But then I'm here like with all these notifications coming in and I could not get out of my car because I was like boom, boom, boom. And I did respond and everything because like I just felt like I needed to.
Well, sometimes you have to in situations like that. If they're bashing you for who you are and how you identify yourself, something needs to be said. That's not
exactly. And like I'm also like I'm very defensive with and like these types of things and like I will go to bat for like all my friends like there's no tomorrow. So this is something that's like so natural for me to do, but it's also something that I know that like I do need to work on and everything for my image. But then again, I'm also just like, well, you know what? If they don't like me like defending myself and my friends, then that the place is not the right place for me. So then that's when I was just kind of like, I'm going to do what I want to do. It's my Twitter.
Yeah. Well,
but like imagine if those people had daughters too, or like if one of their kids in general were part of the LGBTQ community. Like, I hope that they never have daughters because that ain't going to be good.
Yeah. I like that's what I think about whenever somebody says something hateful on this podcast in the comments. I'm just like, what if your daughter saw this? What if your daughter or your wife or your grandma or your mom saw you commenting something like this on a female empowerment podcast? Like,
yeah, exactly.
What do you think about you?
Take the screenshots for receipts. A lot of the responses that came at me were deleted, but I had screenshots of it all.
That's what they do. They comment and then they delete. Like, what's the
cowards,
point?
Honestly. But
so there's just so much that can be said about this topic, honestly.
Yeah, same. I could go on this for like hours, but obviously we don't have that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have another question about it. What's another message? I know I already asked you a question like this, but what is something that you, or a piece of advice or a message you would give to other women who are involved in the sports industry, whether they're an athlete or a reporter and they receive hate due to how they identify their sexual orientation or their gender identity?
I mean, saying ignore it is like a cop-out in my opinion. So I wouldn't necessarily say like ignore it, but I would say like don't brush it off as like not a big deal, because if you do that, then it's going to keep continuing. You got to find like the right people and stuff to do. Like I know a lot about athletes at Mizzou who confide in their teammates about a lot of these things. And it doesn't even have to be about like your sexual orientation. It can just be about like whether or not you transferred from a rival school. Like it can be literally anything. But you just got to like fall back on your support system for it. And like don't keep anything like bottled to yourself at all, because that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are, who you identify as, or anything. Like, and there's a lot of stigma with athletes and like talking about like their struggles and everything. And it's going to be very hard to break that stigma, especially in Division I and especially in men's sports. But like if you find someone to confide in, if you go to like one of the sports psychologists that are readily available to you for like obviously a million reasons, they're there, that you're not weak and you're actually, in my opinion, you're really strong for doing that, because that was just something that a lot of people brush off until they hit like a breaking point.
Yeah.
And so like my advice is literally just to like confide in the people who you trust, and just like, be yourself and everything, because like you just need to have a good support system around you. And if your support system doesn't involve like actual support, then you got to ditch them to the curb. And I know that can be hard, but it's something that's very valuable, especially if it's like a coworker or if it's a teammate. If they're toxic or everything, then like don't be afraid to just like ignore them and stuff. Like if like you're an athlete on a team, like you're like you obviously are probably playing together.
Yeah.
You got to just also like put any of like the personal grievances aside just to like get the main goal of like winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
And in journalism, just to get the main goal of expanding the brand that you're at.
Yeah.
And then just ignore each other.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth your mental health or your energy to fight back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. There's been so many occurrences in my life where I want to like keep my emotions balled to myself, and it's not good. You have to talk to somebody about it. But if that person that you are trying to talk to about it just mentally, emotionally, physically brings you down, just don't talk to them anymore. Like cut them off,
Exactly.
You don't need to be surrounded by people who are constantly giving you bad advice or constantly don't care when you're talking to them. There's like, obviously growing up, you realize that your friend group gets smaller, stuff happens. But like I just keep saying, stay true to yourself and stay true to your loyal friends and your family, because that's who's going to have you forever. And when something horrible or bad just occurs in your life and you need somebody to turn to, those people are going to be the loyal ones, or are going to be the truthful and faithful ones who will have your back till the day that you literally die.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And it took a lot for me to do it. I've lost friends and everything, but like I found the right ones. So it's also just like a learning experience in general. You're going to lose friends at any moment in your life. It doesn't even matter. It's just going to happen if it's a drift away. But you kind of just got to get on and move on and just find the right people. So I agree with you.
And another thing is, don't constantly live in the past, live in the future. Because if you are dwelling on what happened and are dwelling on friendships you lost or relationships you lost, you're never going to move forward. You have to do that for yourself, one step at a time.
Oh yeah, I've had to do that a lot. I've had to really learn about that a lot, but like still learning. Like I said, it's still like a learning process throughout your whole entire life, and I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
But so is like everyone else.
So I know that we were just speaking of discrimination against just a lot of people in general, but what would you say, like, what does the word discrimination mean to you?
I think it just means like being kind of like bullied or looked down on or anything just because of how you identify, the color of your skin, your religion, ethnicity, disability status, mental health status, just literally anything against society's norm. I think that's what it is, and it's everywhere in life. It's in sports. We all know it's in sports, but it's in like any career. Like I think that's like kind of like what it is to me.
Mm-hmm. So how can we as a society do better to break the stigma of this like status quo or this norm that we are holding?
Listen to the people who are part of the community. That's human beings don't like to listen to the opposite side. I happen to really like listening to the opposite side because I want to know like what their mindset was. That's why people told me I should have like minored in psychology, but I did not. I did sociology instead. But like you have to listen. You have to really take their insight into consideration, not to change your own viewpoint, but to understand why this person views XYZ in that way. And then to actually like communicate your opinion, their opinion together to try and learn. Mm-hmm. And we don't really like learning as people. That ain't something that we like to do. Yeah. But you have to just grow out of those old habits and really take into consideration the opposite side. Like I'm never going to understand why like people hate trans people. I'll never get that. I won't understand that. Like why there's so much hate in this world. why a lot of events happen to different minority communities.
Yeah.
Never will understand that. But you have to you really have to listen and take into account how they grew up, their background, all this stuff, their environment, where they're from. Like, I'm from a city, like I'm from the literal city of Houston. I grew up a city kid.
Yeah.
And the people who are 20 minutes away from me in one of the suburbs grew up in a completely different, more affluent, more private, sheltered life. And I had to learn why they think in their specific way, and they had to learn why I think in my own way.
Yeah.
It's just something that you can't go into it with the mindset of screaming at each other and being very angry and then just ditching off the conversation, because that's not how you're going to learn. You have to go into the mindset of wanting to actually learn and figure out what's going on and why XYZ happens and why XYZ thinks this way. And maybe not to find common ground, that's really hard, but to at least learn something new and more understanding. I think that's what people really need to do, but that's also what people don't want to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And growing up, my mom always taught me never judge a book by its cover. So I'm not going to walk on the street and judge somebody for how they look. I'm not going to walk on the street and judge somebody based off of one thing I know. I'm going to get to know you, and I'm going to get to know your background, and I'm going to get to know why you've made the decisions that you've made, why you are the way that you are, or why you even just did this event or whatever occurred. I want to know more about you. I don't want to just look at you and be like, I don't want to look at you and judge you, And that's how more people need to think, instead of just being, what?
That's exactly how I grew up, 100%. So I love learning about different cultures, different everything. So that's exactly what my mom taught me. I guess my dad too. So what both my parents taught me and what my stepmom taught me. Yeah.
Which is great. And those are the people you need to be surrounded by.
Exactly.
So, are there any members of the LGBTQ plus community who you look up to and hold value to in your life? And if so, who are they and why?
So in journalism wise, Kate Fagan, because I first really I knew exactly who she was and I've read her articles, but I really got into her work when she wrote a cover story called "What Made Maddie Run," or wait, no, sorry, that's the book. The book is called "What Made Maddie Run." The article, story and everything, was about the events that happened with Maddie Holleran. And so I was like, ooh, okay, this is cool. I got the book. I got her book called The Repeering Act about being queer at Colorado State, University of Colorado, one of those schools, whichever one she played basketball at. It's in Colorado.
Okay.
And I just really looked up to her, and I was like, okay, so I can do this and everything. It was just not until high school when when I was realizing who I am, my sexuality and stuff, that I really got into her work. And then there's just pro athletes, Michael Sam, for example. He went to Mizzou. He came out as gay right before the NFL draft when he was drafted 7th round by St. Louis. Rip. He kissed his boyfriend, fiance, whatever it was. They're not together anymore. And I was just like, oh, okay. And this was before I was even considering Mizzou. This is just something I loved. So I look up to him and everything. And then now I look up to Lasia Clarendon, because they came out as non-binary a while ago. And then more progressively throughout the year, especially after a former WNBA player posted a poll on her women's basketball Twitter thing, so not her actual personal one, that says, should transgendered, with an ED at the end, girls play in sports? And it was a yes or no thing. And a lot of the WNBA community went off. And because of that, Lasia exposed that, or not, I guess not really exposed, that's the wrong term, announced and shared that he had top surgery, and he wasn't going to do that. So it was just a matter of me looking up to her, and also the fact that they use all the pronouns he, she, they, and whatever thing. That's something that's just it's just so cool. So I definitely look up to Lasia about that. And just honestly, any decent LGBTQ athlete or person in journalism in general, or even like not in sports.
Mhm.
It's just like there's too many to like for me to name. So I guess those were like the top 3 essentially.
Well, they all sound great, and it sounds like they're great inspirations to you, at least.
Oh, definitely.
And to so many other people in the world, hundreds and thousands of people.
Yep, exactly.
So I have one last question for you.
All right, let's rock.
This is a question I ask all my guests. I do it every time I have somebody on here because obviously my podcast is called Play Like a Girl. So I'm wondering what you think it means to play like a girl and why it's important for everybody to know what it means.
Okay, well, before I like actually answer that, do you remember like the
Commercial?
Yes,
It was
whatever like menstrual products it was.
Yeah, it was for pads. Yes.
There we go. Yes. Okay, like that's what that actually reminds me of. But no, like Play Like a Girl like doesn't even remind me of like playing like a girl, period.
Mhm.
But it's kind of just like throwing out the stigma and everything, because like I know a lot of girls and women who can beat boys and males at whatever. Like when I was in Taekwondo and I got my black belt in 5th grade, like I was so much better than a lot of the guys and everything. And like some of the guys who were in my Taekwondo class didn't get their black belts and I got it before them.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of, to me, it means going out there and like not being scared or worried or like anxious about doing what you love and doing sports. Is obviously when you hit puberty, like for example in kickball,
Mhm.
so like a lot of the girls would just like kick it over to third, like very lightly, and just kind of like run like dainty like, and then I would just kind of kick it off to like get a home run.
Yeah, me too.
And like sprint like there's no tomorrow.
Mhm.
So it kind of oh my god, I loved kickball. So it's just like one of those things that's just kind of like being able to overcome the stigma of women can't be athletic and everything, and to just show that like you can play like the boys. Like I think that's like what it really means to me, that it doesn't even matter like what gender you identify as, what body parts you have, or any of that. It just kind of means that like you can play.
Yeah, you can play, period. Any sport, anything, anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. Literally that.
Yeah. So I had such an amazing time speaking to you, Lauren.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. This was really fun.
I would definitely love to have you again. Anytime, I will hit you up. I loved speaking to you. Like I said, I love your story. And I love where you came from, and I love your family so far about how much you've explained them.
Thank you.
No problem. But so I'm going to say goodbye to you for now. I'm always a phone call away or a text message away.
And I am too. 100%.
All right. Have a nice day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Or evening, night, whatever.
Okay, guys. That was Lauren Rosenberg. I absolutely love speaking to her. She has a great story. You can check out some of her articles on our website. But as you guys know, I'm your host, Gianna Cambria. This is Play Like a Girl for the girls, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Pharmaceutical company Prevacus says their new concussion medication Prevacol helps repair nerves and promote cell growth.
We can get the drug in the brain in less than 5 minutes. And our plan is, when we get that diagnosis on the field of play, give the drug nasally, get it in the brain quickly. When it gets in the brain, it actually gets into the nucleus of your brain cells, and it reduces swelling, inflammation, and oxidative stress at the same time.
When Jake and I first talked about this many years ago, one of my first questions was, will this help me? And he goes, no, this is for treatment immediately when a concussion, or you think a concussion has occurred.
Yeah.
The acute problems that exist later on in life, if we can take care of these at an early age and start getting some of these things to our children and grandchildren, and I think we can make this game, our game, football, a safer place.
And so the whole goal is we're trying to make the game safer. And so Odyssey and this drug, we believe, can be a game changer in so many different ways. Yes, on the football field, in the game of football, because that's where my passion lies. but also in the game of life.